Hello everyone and welcome to the video. You are live with Endeavor Gaming, and today we are going to be taking a look at a torpedo build on the all-new Seneca Class command cruiser. So, here we are back in Star Trek Online. Like I said, today we're going to be taking a look at the brand new carrier, one of two out of the new bundle. Make sure to check out my other video coming soon on the Norway class. But let's start with this command carrier, because honestly, this thing has interested me a lot more than I thought it would. First, let's take a look at the build. So, here on the build, I've loaded up what I am now calling my Phase 3 platform. It's got a couple of changes over my previous versions of builds, so let's go ahead and go through it really quick here. In the front, we have the enhanced biomolecular photon torpedo from the 8472 reputation. It's a hard hitter, and you know I'm using it with that torpedo high yield, plus the concentrated firepower that we'll get to a little bit later. We've got the dark matter quantum torpedo launcher. It's a solid choice all day, every day. From the Disco reputation, it's really nice. It has a great two-piece set that we'll get to a little bit later, and I tend to use it on any torpedo build if I can. Lastly, we've got the neutronic torpedo. I was kind of going back and forth between this one and the Delphic. Depending on which one you have, you could really go with either one and get some pretty solid numbers out of it. I just really like the neutronic torpedo. This one's a little bit easier to get. You can get it from the reputation, and that's about it. Moving on to our deflector. I've got one of my science deflectors on here, but I think I might actually end up trading that out for, let's see if I can find it on here. Yes, my shield cap deflector. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why on earth would you care about shield cap? It's going to feed into one of my consoles, one I've been messing around with a lot lately, and I think you guys will really enjoy it. Next, for our impulse engines, not super surprisingly, we have the prevailing competitive engines, giving us that nice little speed boost when we're activating firing bridge modes, and it's so nice to have. Rounding out our space setup, we have the Disco Warp and Shield. I tend to go for this one about as much as I can. Obviously, this one has our shield cap modifier, and our shields are rolled for cap times 4. Again, getting into a console that we're going to cover later. For our rear weapons, I loaded up with mines. Yes, despawning can still be a problem, especially in ISCs, but mines do so much damage. Do be careful, you can kill yourselves with a couple of these. We've got the Elite Fleet General Quantum Mines, as well as the Elite Fleet Tricobalt Mines, and then this one in the middle is one of the biomolecular photon mines. The first two can be procured from the Colony World Fleet Holding, and this one is from the 8472 dilithium store. Our devices, pretty bog standard: kinetic amplifiers, deuterium surplus, our Kobayashi Maru, our temporal negotiator, and then rounding out a large auxiliary battery. This is going to come into play when we are using our space membrane, and we'll get into that console in just a bit. But moving on to our consoles, first off, not surprisingly, Lorca's custom fire controls. It's from the Disco reputation. It's so easy to get, you don't have to spend any money to get it, and it's such a great console. You have crit chance, Weapon power setting, which on this ship doesn't do a whole lot, but that shield pen, hits like a truck. Plus, it's rounding out that 2-piece set with our dark matter quantum. So, just to take a look on that, War Discretion, on crit, 1% critical severity buff for 20 seconds, which stacks up to 25%. Moving on to our engineering consoles, first we have the Ferrofluid Hydraulic Assembly console. This is from the Terran reputation, and it's basically just one of our passive torp consoles. The weapon power setting we're not going to use too much, the auxiliary power we're definitely going to need, and that minus 0.5 second shared torpedo recharge time is oh so very great. The more torpedoes we fire, the better, and since we don't have any energy weapons on this thing, we need to make sure we can keep up our torpedo fire. Next, we have Immolating Phaser Lance. This is the console that definitely rolled over from the Phase 2 builds. If you're using Universal Designs, this is a fantastic console to use with it. You've got 6 charges, you can keep firing them off, and that's free crits. Plus, it's giving you a nice little boost to your shield penetration, kind of like Lorca. Can't go wrong with it. Next, we have DPRM. Again, this is a console I tend to throw on just about every build. Its passives aren't anything that really help me, but it's clicky every 2 minutes, which can be even shorter with something we'll get to later. 40% bonus damage, 100% bonus damage resistance rating for survivability, and a nice boost to whole regen. So basically, it makes it so that you can't die, and it's giving you bonus damage. Great console. Rounding out our engineering consoles, we have Phase Space Membrane. This is another fantastic console I've started using on a lot more of my torpedo builds. That clicky is going to give you scaling damage based on your aux power. So as long as you can keep your aux power up while this console is active, you're looking at anywhere between 20 and 400% bonus all damage with torpedo weapons, which just happens to be the sorts of weapons we're running here. And again, that's why I have that auxiliary battery on there. When my power levels start going down as it drains my aux power, I believe it does 10 every second, you'll be able to get it right back up when you pop one of these batteries. Moving on to science consoles, we've got 4 of them as this is a carrier. We've got Tricobot Terror Launcher. This is one off of the Appalachia class. This is just a nice clicky, does a pretty solid amount of damage, and has passives for both mines and torpedoes. Next, we have Tachyon Net Drones. This has started being used in my builds in place of the Tholian Web Spinner console. I know that console hasn't been nerfed into oblivion yet, but I'm definitely liking this one a little bit more. It gives you some nice crits. The perception is fine. That's not going to help you too much in PvE, but it is going to lower the damage resistance rating of all of the ships that are trapped inside of it, which is pretty great. And then, I believe its last proc down here is when you get a critical hit, it will apply an extra amount of kinetic damage, which obviously we're going to be aiming for about as much as we can. Next, we have Ordnance Accelerator. This comes from the Gamma reputation, and again, this is just one of our torpedo passive consoles. It'll give us a nice little boost to our projectile weapon damage and a 20% boost to our mine recharge speed, as well as a 1.5 second shared mine recharge time reduction, which is great. Again, the more we can fire things out, the better we're going to be in combat. Rounding out our science consoles, we have Bioneural Infusion Circuits. Again, this is another holdover from the Phase 2 builds. The hull capacity is nice, the control expertise can be nice depending on what kind of build you're doing, but the crit severity is really where it's at. Moving on to our tactical consoles, we have Swarmer Matrix. Again, this is another torpedo sort of console. Turn speed, flight speed, and damage for your hangar pets and targetable torpedoes. We don't have any targetable torpedoes on this build, but we do have hangar pets, so we're gonna throw it on. Plus, that plus 50 to projectile weapon training is giving us crits on our mines and torps, which is always nice. Next, the big console I was getting to, the reason why I had so much shield cap stuff, Console Universal Debris Screen. This has replaced Agony Redistributor on my builds. The TLDR of this console is, the more shield capacity you can get, the harder you can ram into things. You pop this console, you fly into a tactical cube, it will do 1,000,000 damage, and it is so much fun. I've gotten anywhere between 800,000 all the way up to 10 million, depending on how lucky I am and where my shields are at. Again, that's going to depend a lot more heavily on your build. On a build more like this that sort of leans into shield cap but doesn't really give anything up for it, I normally aim between about 1.5 million and 6 million. basically anywhere there, depending on when you use it and what kind of buffs you have active. Rounding out, we've got one vulnerability locator. You could potentially put on some other console if there was a click you really wanted, but I like the crit chance, plus that 34.5% boosted torpedo weapon damage is always nice. For our hangers, I thought I'd try out the Elite Valkyrie fighters. These do consume stacks of concentrated firepower since they have torpedo spread and torpedo high yield, but I've been having a ton of fun with them, and they look awesome. I wouldn't necessarily recommend using them in an ISE. I still need to do more testing to find out exactly how they're going to shape up. And obviously, since it's a carrier, we got 2 hangar bays of them, which is really nice. Moving on to our traits. First off, we've got Good Day to Die. Most of this is going to be pretty similar to what I've used on my previous torpedo builds. If you've seen my build on the Sagan, a lot of this is going to look pretty familiar. This one is just going to give us Go Down Fighting, being able to be used at any hull integrity, which is going to give us a nice little boost to our damage resistance rating and a pretty sizable boost, bonus all damage, 50%. Next, we've got Context is for Kings. Again, this is one that if you have it, throw it on basically any build you can. It's a win-win situation. If you take damage in the last second, you get damage resistance rating. If you didn't take damage, bonus all damage. The more the merrier. Next, we've got Anchored. This one is going to depend heavily on how you fly. In a ship like this, I would want to sit still more, which means I would throw Anchored on. While stationary, you're going to gain a stack of Anchored every 5 seconds, and it's going to give you bonus damage with each one of those stacks, and it stacks up to 4 times. Next, one specific for running ISEs. If you're doing solo content, this one won't be as important, but Fleet Coordinator, a nice little bonus damage boost, which scales with how many people are on your team. Next, Intelligence Agent Attaché. This is going to help with our Captain ability recharge. Every time we get a crit, that's 2% shaved off. Again, this is one of those the more the merrier things. You want a crit, you want to get the boost from that. Next, not super surprisingly, Superior Projectile Training, 7.5% bonus projectile weapon damage, easy choice. Unconventional Systems, this is a big one. You want to use control abilities on this ship. I don't have a lot of science stuff, but I definitely do have procs for unconventional systems, and that is very important. It's going to give you a 7% recharge to your universal consoles. The shorter we can get all these cooldowns, the better the ship is going to do. Next, we have Terran Targeting Systems, which is going to give us a nice little boost to our crit severity. Do keep in mind that it could potentially work against you if you're getting critted a lot. Luckily in PvE content, that is much more rare. Next, we have Resonating Payload Modification. So this one is going to arm all of our torpedo warheads with basically an extra proc that will take away physical and kinetic damage resistance for 20 seconds, which stacks up to 5 times. And then rounding out, again, not overly surprising, we've got Boimler. Recharge times. This trait is great. If you don't have it, I highly recommend picking it up. It's absolutely fantastic. Moving on to our Starship traits. Like I said before, with Immolating Phaser Lens, we're running Universal Designs. Every time we activate a Universal Console, we're getting a nice little boost to our crits, 2% chance and 10% severity. Next, we have Entwined Tactical Matrices. The idea of this is to keep up our torpedo spread as much as possible. We'll have a torpedo spread that we'll get to later, and we'll have a fire at will. That will give us a torpedo spread. The more torpedoes, the merrier. Next, we have Superior Area Denial. This is a carrier. I thought that I would really want to have Scatter Volley, and with the Valkyrie fighters or the Alliance fighters, it can come in handy quite a lot. Next, we have Subspatial Warheads. On a torpedo build, there's no reason not to use it. It'll create a nice little subspace tear with every torpedo high yield attack, and it'll do a good amount of extra damage. Next, we have Advanced Precision Guided Munitions. This comes off of one of the new ships out of the Responder bundle, and it basically works like Subspatial Warhead. It'll just do extra kinetic damage on the next torpedo attack when you activate a weapon mode. Lastly, and I love this trait so much, Rapid Emitting Armaments. When activating Tractor Beam, 15% bonus Cat 2 torpedo weapon damage for 10 seconds, plus firing off 3 heavy plasma torpedoes at foe, which will each deal a massive amount of kinetic damage and have a plasma DOT. My one warning, and those of you who have watched my streams know from experience, Do not be within 2 kilometers of your target when you hit tractor beam. Those torpedoes will blow you up. It will hurt. It will be embarrassing. Moving on to our space reputation, we've got Tyler's Duality, crit chance based on hull capacity. I tend to throw this one on, especially on some of my stronger ships. Sometimes I'll take it off in the case of, some of my lighter ships, some of my escorts, but this one, I can get a good amount of crit chance out of it. Next, we have Omega Kinetic Shearing. Again, torpedoes. Torpedoes and mines will deal a little bit of extra damage, 12.5% of whatever damage they did as a DOT. Magnified Firepower. Can't go wrong with 6.3 bonus weapon damage. Torpedo Pre-Fire Sequence, which is again giving us bonus torpedo weapon damage, and 41.3 destructible torpedo flight speed. That second one doesn't help us too much, but 15.6 bonus torpedo damage, yes please. And lastly, we've got Advanced Targeting Systems. This is going to give us a 20% boost to our crit severity. I know, it's pretty solid. The only thing I would recommend is if you only have the rank 2 of this, it might potentially be worth throwing on, let's see if I can remember the name of it, Precision, which is also a boost to your critical hit chance, which is 5%. The rank 2 of this, with this, is giving me 5.2, which is why I'm using Tyler's Duality over it. But if you don't have as much hull, and whatever boost you'd be getting from this would be less than 5.2%, and you have Precision rank 2, you can go for Precision. Lastly, rounding this out, these are things sort of specific to ISEs, but it's dealer's choice. Anti-time Singularity. The Biomolecular Shield Generator in case you're taking a ton of damage or the tank dies and you really need a last minute hull heal. Quantum Singularity Manipulation. Instead of using a hull heal, the enemy can't target you if they can't see you. And lastly, Tethered Non-Baryonic Asteroid. I use this one to pull things from the left generator over to the right generator, any probes or spheres we might have missed, so that I can torpedo them later. Moving to our stations, we have a couple of new arrivals to my normal setup. I've been able to replace a bunch of my bridge officers with SROs, so let's go down the list of our brand new abilities. First off, we have Havrock here. He's a tactical, and he's also an SRO, obviously, but since this is a Miracle Worker ship, we threw on Narrow Sensor Bands 1 and Mix Armaments Synergy 1. If you've got the Miracle Worker seats and you're running more than 2 different weapon types, I'd always recommend trying to throw these on. Bonus damage is never bad, and this is bonus damage based on how far or close you are to your target. Next, we've got Bernard. He's from all of the Phase 2 builds too, Tactical SRO. We've got our Torpedo, High Yield, to proc off our subspatial warheads. And these two, even though we're not using beams or cannons, are going to tie into our Entwined Tactical Matrices. So if we don't have a High Yield going, we're going to have a spread going. Plus, icing on the cake, we're also proccing off Superior Area Denial, the trait I mentioned earlier. Moving on to our Engineer, I basically threw on everything I would need as far as unconventional procs or going faster. Ensign seat, we have emergency powered engines, which will tie into a duty officer we'll get to a little bit later. We have Emit Unstable Warp Bubble 1, again, basically just to proc unconventional systems, and Eject Warp Plasma 1. I'm personally not a massive fan of this ability, but it is an unconventional proc, so it goes on. The thing I've used besides that has been Structural Integrity Collapse 3, which is a nice little debuffer, especially if you're running torpedoes. Moving on to our science, we do have an SRO in this place as well as with the Engineer we just mentioned. So we've got the unconventional proc and Tractor Beam 1, as well as it proccing our rapid emitting armaments, which is great. We have Photonic Officer. Again, this one is going to be used for any cooldown fill-in sort of space. Then we have Concentrated Firepower 3. If you're running a torp build, there's basically no reason not to run this. Extra kinetic damage, plus it'll grant a high yield 1. It's great. And then lastly, we have Call Emergency Artillery 3. Since they buffed Command last year, this ability has been considerably more fun. It does more damage and it's easier to aim and actually have hit your target. Rounding out, we do not have an SRO here. We actually have our old Potato Head Pirate, who is giving us a nice little boost to our bonus damage, and we've got Jam Targeting Sensors 1 on here, basically just for the unconventional proc. Moving on to our duty officers, first we have our Cation Projectile Weapons Officer, a 20% chance of improving the recharge time by 5 seconds. This one's pretty easy to acquire. I believe you get a free one. There's also Law that's pretty easy to attain, and overall it's a great choice on torpedo builds. Next, we have our first liberated Borg Romulan duty officer. This is one of the security officers. On engineering abilities, it has a 15% chance of setting our power levels to max, including auxiliary, which is important. And then on our 2 miracle worker abilities, a 30% chance of improving our weapon armor penetration by 20 for 30 seconds. Next, we have a Talaxian, who is giving us a 20% chance of giving us a plus 10 to crit severity buff for 15 seconds. And this is on fire and projectiles. This is an absolutely amazing duty officer. Unfortunately, it's really expensive off of the exchange. I was very lucky and was able to get one, but if you got one, I'd highly recommend using it on basically any torpedo build you have. Next, we have our emergency con hologram. This one is going to give us a recharge reduction to our evasive maneuvers when we use emergency powered engines. It's a very nice one. It can be acquired fairly easily, and there's really nothing not to like about it. Next, we have our second of 3 Borg duty officers. This one is pretty similar to the last one. Tactical abilities, 15% chance of setting power levels to max, and on miracle worker abilities, a 30% chance to improve our critical chance for 30 seconds. And then lastly, we have our command and tactical one. So on tactical, a 15% chance of improving our team-wide max hull by 10 seconds, and on command, a 30% chance to improve our crit chance by 2.5% for 30 seconds. Again, another nice one. We've got things that build up our crits, we have things that help our power levels, and it should help quite a lot in combat. Now that we've gone over the build, let's take this thing into combat and see how it performs.
Entered an area controlled by the Benson Guard. You are now looks like our fight got them to overhead. Their saw might come out high. Keep concentrating fire on individual ships. Separate them. Whittle down their numbers. We will not go quietly. Thank you for your assistance, and welcome to this sector. There have been rumors that the Borg are fighting large-scale battles. We have the suspect in custody now.
And as you saw, there was absolutely no problem getting through that wanted. But let's take it into something a little bit spicier. Something where not only is damage important, but survivability is important. So let's go into a rescue and search on Elite and see how the new Seneca Class command carrier stacks up.
Good to see you, my friend. We... We did it. Sensible too. Klingon vessels are warping into your position.
Thank you for... Truly the...
Our system under the circumstances deal. That's one less rip to worry about. Let's replete the smart ship.
Bad news, I'm afraid. Klingons are approaching our position. awesome.
Absolutely fantastic. This ship thoroughly annihilated the Mokai in that patrol, and on Elite no less. This ship has honestly impressed me with how resilient it's actually able to be. I talked a lot of smack about carriers, mostly about the Jupiter, and I am happy to say that this ship shut me up. It's a very solid carrier. If you want to go Space Barbie and have that dedicated fleet carrier, this is a great choice, and I don't think I would be wrong in saying this is one of the best carriers in the game. Having a full command specialization lends itself very well to this ship's performance, and in the Zen store at a price of 30,000 Zen when not on sale, it's a solid buy if you want to go carriers. It'll unlock the Valkyrie pets, which are very solid. Hopefully you already have the Alliance fighters if you want to do team fights in ISEs. And it's got a great setup. The only things I think I would even change about it is potentially, adding in another weapon slot. Having 4 weapons would be great, but it's a carrier, so I knew it was going to be 3-3. And obviously carriers do still have their problems. They're still not quite competitive with flight deck carriers, but this is definitely a step in the right direction, and if this is a sign of what's to come, I'm very excited. Let me know what you think of the ship down below in the comments section. If you liked the video, make sure to like and hit subscribe to get notified of all of the upcoming videos. There will be one soon on the brand new Norway, so make sure to check out that. Well, that's all I got for today, everyone. As always, you have been live with Endeavor Gaming, and remember to keep calm and game on.